There is no pit so deep that God's love is not deeper still. If you feel unlovable today, or if you think you've wandered too far off the map for anyone to find you, this message is your rescue. I was completely and utterly lost. But I wasn't just lost, I was drowning in plain sight. After more than one suicide attempt, I hadn't just given up on life. I had actively resigned from it. I didn't believe in happy endings. Those were for movies. And I definitely didn't believe in a God who gave a damn about me. The world had faded to this static gray, and I was just a ghost haunting my own body, waiting until I had the nerve to finally disappear for good. I'd already written the notes. I had the plan. I was ready to go. This isn't just a story about feeling sad. This is the story of how an encounter with a relentless, aggressive love at a Bible camp I never wanted to go to became the only reason I'm still breathing today. The emptiness wasn't a sudden storm. It didn't hit me all at once. It was more like a slow, quiet flood that started seeping into the corners of my life until the water was up to my neck. There was this nagging, persistent feeling that something was fundamentally wrong with my factory settings. On paper, I was fine. I had friends, I had a family. I showed up to school. I performed the script of a normal human perfectly, but it was all an act. Inside, there was this hollow space, a vacuum that just kept expanding, eating away at the edges of who I was. I tried to fill it with anything I could get my hands on. I chased good grades like they were oxygen. I threw myself into relationships. I grabbed at every distraction available. I figured if I could just collect enough happy moments, stack them high enough, they'd eventually add up to a real life. But the math never worked. The high would always fade, usually at 3 a.m., and the hollowness would return, feeling even bigger and colder than before. That hollowness eventually soured into this heavy, constant sadness. It wasn't just an emotion. It was physical. It was a lead weight strapped to my shoulders, crushing my chest, sitting heavy behind my eyes. Getting out of bed wasn't just a chore. It felt like climbing Everest without oxygen. Even the muscles required to smile felt exhausted. All the color and life I saw in the world around me felt like a foreign film in a language I couldn't speak. I would hear other people laughing, and it sounded like a broadcast from another planet. A planet I was exiled from. I started to believe the lies the darkness whispered to me. And they are seductive whispers. You're worthless. You're a burden. Nobody actually likes you. They just tolerate you. It's never going to get better. These didn't feel like intrusive thoughts. They felt like empirical facts. They became the lens through which I processed reality. If a friend canceled plans, it wasn't a scheduling conflict. It was proof I was unwanted. A small mistake on a test wasn't a learning opportunity. It was evidence that I was incompetent. The world felt like a courtroom where I was constantly on trial, and the verdict was always guilty. So I started to see only one logical exit. The thought of ending my life started as a whisper. But the deeper I sank, the louder and more persuasive that voice got. It promised the one thing I wanted more than happiness: peace. It promised an off switch for the pain. My first attempt was desperate, clumsy, and terrifying. Thankfully, it didn't work. But surviving didn't make me feel relief. It didn't give me a new lease on life. It just added a deep, suffocating layer of shame. I felt like a failure at everything, even at dying. That secret became a wall between me and everyone else. How do you tell someone over breakfast that you tried to check out of existence the night before? The darkness had a new weapon against me: the shame of still being alive. There were other attempts after that. Each one just cemented the idea that I was broken beyond repair. I hated the person in the mirror. All I could see was weakness. The despair was total. It swallowed everything. I was crushed, and I saw absolutely no way out. Finally, I just surrendered. I stopped fighting the current. I stopped trying to feel better, and just accepted that my narrative was meant to be a tragedy. I was just waiting for the end, drifting. Hope wasn't just gone. The word had been erased from my vocabulary. I was convinced I was completely isolated, cut off from the love and acceptance everyone else seemed to breathe so easily. And it was right there, in that place of total, absolute brokenness, that an intervention I never asked for showed up. My family, watching the empty shell I'd become, made a last-ditch effort. They signed me up for a week-long summer Bible camp. Of course, I fought it. I fought it with everything I had. The whole idea was ridiculous. Camp? With singing? and forced cheerfulness, and people talking about a God who I was sure had either forgotten me or never existed. It sounded like a new, customized circle of hell, but I was too tired to keep fighting them. With a heart full of resentment and bitterness, I went, convinced it would just be another meaningless week on my way to nothingness. I had no idea I was walking toward the single most important moment of my existence. The first few days were exactly as brutal as I predicted. I wasn't a participant. I was an anthropologist studying a species I hated. I stood with my arms locked across my chest during the worship songs, jaw clenched, refusing to mouth a single word. The joyful music felt fake, plastic, and annoying. The sermons about God's love felt like cheap greeting cards, platitudes meant for people with easy lives, not for me. I watched other kids laughing and making friends with a sincerity that I just couldn't compute. It didn't make me want to join them. It made me angry. They seemed to have a peace I couldn't imagine, and I hated them for it. I was cynical about everything. Every smile felt forced. I spent my time trying to be invisible, haunting the quiet corners of the camp, just counting down the minutes until I could go home to my familiar misery. The leaders were nice, sure, but I felt like their project, the broken kid they had to fix to earn a merit badge. I was polite, but inside I had built walls so high and so thick that I was sure nothing, human or divine, could ever breach them. On the third night, the theme was Unfailing Love. I almost skipped it. I genuinely considered hiding in the cabin. The title alone felt like a slap in the face. Unfailing love? My entire life experience was that love always fails. People leave. Feelings fade. The whole idea was a fairy tale for gullible people. But for some reason, maybe just because there was nowhere else to go, I dragged myself to the main hall. I sat in my usual spot in the back, in the shadows, ready to tune out. The music started, and I stayed silent, arms crossed. But this time the atmosphere shifted. The songs weren't just happy, clappy anthems. They were raw. They were about being broken, being lost, and crying out for help. They were singing my internal monologue. The lyrics sounded less like a victory chant, and more like a desperate plea from the edge of a cliff. Then the speaker got up. He wasn't some old guy in a suit. He wasn't much older than me, and he didn't preach at us. He just told the truth. He opened up about his own battle with severe depression, about feeling worthless, about hating the skin he was in. He talked about a time when he felt like God was a million miles away, silent and indifferent. With every sentence, I felt a chip fall from the fortress I'd built. He wasn't just giving a speech. He was reading my diary. After he finished, the band started playing again. It was a simple song with a simple, repetitive line. God's love is relentless. Relentless. That word echoed in the empty cavern of my chest. Not gentle, not polite, relentless. A love that chases you down. A love that acts like a hunter. A love that refuses to take no for an answer. And then, it happened. I can't explain the physics of it, but standing there in the dark back of the room, something inside me shattered. For the first time in years, a single tear rolled down my face, then another, and then the dam broke. I was sobbing. Not quiet, dignified crying, but ugly, gut-wrenching heaving. It was the sound of a soul that had been holding its breath for a lifetime finally exhaling. I wasn't thinking about theology or religion. I was just overwhelmed. In that moment, it felt like a warm, liquid light was pouring into me, filling up all those hollow, broken places I'd tried to hide. It was a presence so real, so heavy. It felt like someone was physically holding me together. It was love, but not the human kind. It wasn't earned. It wasn't conditional. It didn't judge me for my past attempts or my anger. There was no hatred. No, I told you so. It was a love that saw all of my darkness, my ugliness, my despair, and didn't back away an inch. It just enveloped me. It simply said, I know everything, and I am still here. A thought, clear as a bell, cut through the noise in my head. It wasn't my own voice. It was a gentle, powerful whisper. I will never leave you. Never will I forsake you. The words were from a Bible verse I must have heard somewhere. But suddenly they weren't ink on a page. They were a living promise being spoken directly to my DNA. A mountain of anxiety I'd been carrying for years started to lift. The chains of shame and fear that had bound me snapped. I felt the toxicity wash away. I didn't see a vision. I didn't hear thunder. It was an internal, deep, and undeniable encounter. It was the moment the idea of God's love stopped being a theory and became my reality. I felt seen. I felt known. And in the middle of being completely known, with all my flaws exposed, I felt completely loved. It was the rescue I had stopped believing in. I cried until I literally had no tears left, not from sadness, but from a tidal wave of relief. In the back of that loud room at a camp I hated, I was found. Waking up the next morning was surreal. For the first time in memory, my first thought wasn't dread. The heavy blanket of despair that was always there was gone. The world wasn't suddenly perfect. My problems hadn't magically vanished, but the filter had changed. The way I saw everything had shifted. There was this quiet hum of hope under the surface. It was like seeing in high-definition color after a lifetime of black and white static. It wasn't a magic fix. Healing is a process, not an event. The weeks that followed were all about learning how to live in this new reality. There were still sad moments. There were echoes of the old darkness. But now they didn't have the teeth they used to. When the whispers of worthlessness tried to creep back in, they were drowned out by the memory of that relentless love. That encounter became my anchor. I started reading the Bible, not out of obligation, but because I was starving to know the architect of that love. Verses I'd ignored suddenly felt electric. 18. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit wasn't just poetry anymore. It was my biography. I learned that even heroes in the Bible, like David and Elijah, had moments of suicidal despair. Yet God never stopped loving them. It was a massive relief to know that my brokenness didn't disqualify me. My relationships transformed. The walls came down. I started talking, really talking, to my family and friends. I shared my story, and for the first time I let people help carry the load. The crushing isolation evaporated as I stepped into a community. My life found a new axis. Before, my entire existence was about avoiding pain. Now, it was about living in the love I had found. Years later, I found myself back at that same camp, but this time as a leader. I sat with kids who were just like I used to be, skeptical, hurting, wearing masks. I could look them dead in the eye and say with absolute authority, "I know how you feel. I've been in that pit. But let me tell you about a love that changes the game." My greatest pain had been recycled into my greatest purpose. Today, my life isn't perfect. I still have hard days. But my foundation has changed. I'm no longer fighting for scraps of affection. My identity isn't based on my failures or my unstable feelings, but in the unfailing, relentless love of a God who rescued me when I couldn't rescue myself. My story isn't about how strong I was. It's about a love that wouldn't let me go. It's about a God who specializes in the brokenhearted. If you are reading this right now and you feel like I did, lost, hopeless, buried in a darkness that feels terminal, I need you to hear me. You are not alone. There is a relentless love that is hunting you down right now. A love that sees your pain and isn't intimidated by it. Your story isn't over. This feeling is not the final chapter. There is hope, even when you can't feel it. God has a plan for you, a future, and a hope. If you don't know what to do, start with the simplest, most honest prayer you can muster. Right where you are. Just say, "God, I'm lost. I'm hurting. I've given up, but I heard this story, and I want to know if this love is real for me. If you're there, show me. Rescue me. I give you my broken pieces. Please make me whole." He will hear you. His love is the ultimate rescue, and it's a free gift. Please don't give up. Reach out. Take one more breath. Take one more step. Because I am living proof that His unfailing love changes everything.